I say Byrum Brown is a top 5 transfer portal quarterback. What does Zac Blackerby of Locked On Auburn?
Hmm.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Crossover of Locked On Auburn and Locked On the Portal. I'm your host, Brian Smith, along with Zac Blackerby of Locked On Auburn. Thank you for making each of our shows your first listen each and every day right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. We are going to be discussing the SEC, the influx of quarterbacks, some of the guys that are leaving, and just the SEC overall at the end of the show. Auburn receivers. A lot has been made about it. Zac and I have talked about it on this show a couple of times. I'm curious as what he thinks about the receiving group overall. Now that he's had some time to reflect, we're going to talk about several questions about Brown. How good is he? Where does he rank? And is he, quite frankly, a top 5 quarterback? And to that, what do you think, Mr. Blackerby? Would you say out of all the quarterbacks, and this is my top 5, just for the record.
Sure.
Derek Mensa going to Miami from Duke, Brendan Sorsby going to Texas Tech from Cincinnati, Byrum Brown going to Auburn for USF, Sam Leavitt, Will Leary on because of the Liz Frank injury. I got him number 4. He's going from ASU to LSU. Then Drew Mestamaker from North Texas headed to Oklahoma State. So I got Brown in the middle of that. Well, I know I'm higher than most people, but I'm a big production guy, and he's running the same offense, bringing the same receivers. What say you? Is he a top 5 transfer portal quarterback?
I think so. And I'm glad you have him above Sam Leavitt because I'm right there with you. I think Byrum Brown has fewer questions around him than Sam Leavitt. And a lot of that situation, right? Like, I think this is a different discussion if you throw all these quarterbacks just in a vacuum and they're not tied to coaches and they're not tied to town, they're not tied to school, but they are. That's how football is played. And so him following his head coach, him following his offensive coordinator, the exact same system. Heck, Brian, Alex Golesh was down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. He answered a few questions for media members, and he was asked point blank, hey, you brought Byrum Brown with you. You brought the center, Cole Best from USF with you. Like, how important is that going to be when install rolls around? He's like, monumental. So, in fact, he actually even said it helps him sleep better at night. Like, the relief that he had, like, talking about it. And I think that's going to be widespread throughout the entire offense. I mean, you mentioned the receivers just a second ago. They're pretty much all from South Florida, right? I mean, he's got multiple offensive linemen coming over from South Florida. One of the running backs is from South Florida. They know this system. And that allows you to, I think, get through that first part of spring when you're talking about that initial install, which is a big deal because then you can move on to focus on other things. So Byrum Brown is going to benefit from every bit of that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big deal. And quite frankly, he's one of the best players in college football in terms of production this past year. You can say whatever you want about it. Is he a top 5 transfer portal quarterback? We answered that. Is there another quarterback that you would have rather had? I can't imagine it with Golesh being the coach because, I mean, you got to fit system to coach and all that. But if anybody else intrigued you, who would it be?
Yeah, like if the answer to that is no, assuming Alex Golesh is Auburn's head coach. If we want to have like the just who's better 1v1, I really like Mensa. I'm there with you. I really, really like Mensa. We'll see what he can do at Miami. I mean, Miami's got a pretty good track record of getting, those one and done quarterbacks in through the portal. But with Golesh, like, no, I would not rather have any other quarterback than Byrum Brown.
Number 3, is Brown trustworthy during clutch situations? This is something as an Auburn fan, I'm sure you have the yips about based on the last couple of seasons. But I watched Brown and for whatever the reason, he seems to do his best work when it's a 7-point game or less. I don't know why that is, but he's pretty clutch. Do you have any fear that the competition step up, obviously SEC, no offense to USF, it's not the same level, is going to be a problem when they play the likes of LSU, Bama, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, you talking about the clutch factor and all of this, which you're right. I mean, Auburn continued to find different ways to lose, and they got pretty creative with it over the last few years. But when you look at some of these games that they played, like not a lot of them were close one way or the other. They blitzed Boise State in the opener last year. One of the few close games that they had that resulted in a win was in Gainesville against Florida. And the game was sealed with a Byrum Brown run to kind of, move the chains and put them in a situation to eat up the rest of the clock. So I think that's a point in his favor. They got blown out by Miami. And then, it wasn't close when they played South Carolina State, Charlotte, North Texas, Florida Atlantic. They did lose a close one to Memphis. They blew out UTSA. They lost a close one to Miami. And then the rest of their games weren't close. So I don't think we really know what that looks like, because they were kind of put in a situation to where you didn't have to be pretty often. But you had a few close losses, the close loss to Memphis, the close loss to Navy. Maybe that's a point against them. But I don't think we really know the answer to that.
Do you think Byrum will lead the squad in rushing? I bet you've talked about this with some of your other co-hosts, but I'm fascinated at your answer to this.
Yeah. I'm going to say no, but I could easily be persuaded the other way, because when you look at what they did at USF, he had 175 carries. The next highest on the team was Nakai Davenport, who transferred. He's now an Auburn Tiger as well. He just had 98. So pretty big difference there. Byrum had over 1,000 yards rushing. That's been well documented. The leading rusher from the non-quarterback spot was Davenport with 612. Auburn's running back room is loaded. It's one of the better ones in the SEC. If you want to zoom out a little bit more and say it's a top group in college football, I'm not going to push back on that. The production's pretty astounding with Cobb, with Washington, with Davenport. I mean, even Tay Meadows that they brought from Troy, I think, has been productive. And then you and I are very high on Omar Mabson, very high on him, who,
Yes.
He'll be in his second year, but he's the age of a freshman because of the early enrollee thing. I just can't imagine you bring all those guys in and don't use them. I also don't know if you can rush a Byrum Brown 170 plus times in the SEC. One of the things Golesh talked about in his intro presser, where everybody kind of got to hear him for the first time, he talked about when he was with Heupel, and Heupel went from UCF to Tennessee, and then he took his guys from Tennessee to USF. He talked about how it's different. You have to change what you do when when they were at UCF, then went to Tennessee, and then he had to change it again when they went from Tennessee to USF. And now obviously they'll have to change it from USF to Auburn because of talent, because of scheme, because it's just a different style of football. The same thing doesn't work everywhere, and you have to adapt. I kind of think this is part of that. I don't think you can run Byrum Brown in the SEC. I don't think it's worth it with these running backs that you have. I don't think it's worth rushing him that often. So I'm going to say no, but there's also a chance that they do rush him less, and then they just divide the carries up between Cobb and Washington and Davenport and Meadows to where he still does lead. But I think there's a strong argument either way for that question.
I agree. It'll be a difficult answer because what you just said there at the end. And I also agree. Putting him in harm's way is probably not the greatest thing to do. I think that you've got to be very, very careful about that. When we come back, we're going to discuss Auburn's schedule. How much does Brown impact the final record? That is next here on this crossover, Locked on Auburn and Locked on the Portal. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It is the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in all the action before the National Football League season officially comes to a close. It's Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're taking your favorite player to go big in this game, whether you're talking about Drake May, which I'm sure Zac Blackerby will be doing, whatever it may be, you can ride with the underdog or anything else. Play the quarters. You can play 30-yard pass reception for a receiver, anything you want with FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, you can bet just $5. And if it wins, you can get $200 in bonus bets from FanDuel. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the football season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show is also part of the Everydayer Club announcement. We have that going on, whether it's Locked On Auburn, Locked On the Portal. Down below, we have a description, lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. And if you want to check it out for either of our shows, you can get your audio without ads, $5 a month or $50 for the year. There's a Discord and more. Check out the Everydayer show down below. All right, Zach. Once again, schedule for Auburn, just like pretty much every year, your guys' schedule is usually not the easiest. I think I don't know, what do you say? It went up because you added Florida, you added LSU, Vandy. I mean, they had Pavia, then they don't now, but like, what do you
go to Tennessee, which is going to be tough.
That's not a friendly one either. So this is in the order, as far as my opinion of their tougher games. I'm taking Vandy off the list because Pavia is not there. That's the next one on the list, but Florida at home. They've got Tennessee on the road, Georgia on the road, LSU at home, Ole Miss on the road, and Bama is also on the road. Do they win at least 2 of those games, at least 3? If you want to point out which ones you think they'll win, that's fine. But how many of the big games do you think they'll win? Because I know that's something from living in that community, like Auburn fans, like they're frustrated with not winning big games. They won A&M a couple years ago. That was big.
Yeah.
But like they're just not winning the big games. What say you?
Yeah, I think they can win 2 of those. I've made the claim. It's so easy to compare yourself to the top of the conference. Like, okay, where do we rank against Georgia or Bama or Texas? Whoever you want to put at the top there going into the season. I don't really think that's what this is about. I think this is about, okay, can Alex Golesh put Auburn in a better situation year 1 versus the rest of the coaches in the SEC in year 1? So, I mean, the list that you've got there, Florida first-year head coach, LSU first-year head coach, Ole Miss first-year head coach. They also play Arkansas, which would fall into this category. If Alex Golesh can be the best first-year head coach and that show up on the field and you win those games, you've got a shot. You've got a shot to have a really cool season. Of the games you just listed, Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, and Bama, I think if you win 3 of those, you're over the moon. I think it's a pretty big ask. I do think there's a path to 2 wins. I think there's a path to 3 wins, but I think Florida at home is gettable. I think on the road at Tennessee is interesting because of the whole him and Heupel connection, and Golesh used to be, the OC there. That's going to be an easy storyline to write that week. LSU, I mean, you mentioned the questions around Leavitt. What happens with that? And then obviously, going to Ole Miss, they're pretty good a year ago, and it seems like Trinidad Chambliss is likely to return. And if not, it'd be kind of fun to see Deuce Knight host the Auburn Tigers as well. So I agree with the games that you have on there. Those are probably the biggest ones for sure. Yeah, if you could find a way, I think of those, Florida's the most gettable. And then LSU, I think it just kind of depends on how that unfolds. But yeah, no, that's a tough slate for sure.
Yeah, and it's also ironic because, like, let's be honest, Florida transfer portal quarterback. Tennessee tried to get Leavitt, among others.
I think they thought they had him.
Yeah, they did. And that obviously didn't work out. LSU ends up with Leavitt. Ole Miss, Deuce Knight, and then Bama's Bama. Like, Georgia's the only one that's kind of status quo. Gunnar Stockton's back. So portal is involved with almost all the different quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really wild. And that's just part of football, and then college football making me exciting. There's nothing quite like college football. To that end, what do you think the impact of Auburn's wide receivers coming over? What is it? 4 of them? 5 of them? I mean, it's a bunch. Like
Singleton, Nimrod, Koger, Neptune, Pettigrew. So 5.
That's
from South Florida. Yep.
I mean, that offense is not the most difficult to learn anyway, but just having the timing, the rhythm, the trust with certain guys, I think is more important than the playbook.
Yeah.
So, they've got productivity amongst that group. And do you think that can be the difference in some of the close games we've talked about, like, whether it's Bama or Tennessee or whatever? Because to me, I'm not sure that the Auburn coaching staff was all that enamored with the receivers last year. We're talking about the previous staff, because they just had so many drops. Like in the game against Bama, PFF had 7 drops for Auburn receivers. That's insane. And I mean, it wasn't a lack of talent, but still.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the total opposite of last year, with the exception of Singleton, because what he did at Georgia Tech was pretty cool. But I mean, going into last year, we talked about how on paper Auburn had the best, an incredible receiving core, and it just didn't really turn into anything. I don't think it's all on them. I do think some of it's on them. I don't think it's all on them. Quarterback play, scheme, O-line play, whatever. But yeah, I mean, Singleton, Coleman, Simmons, Perry Thompson, Horatio Fields, all gone. And you replace it with guys who aren't ranked as high, but the production is there. And it's in a scheme that they already know. I've got my questions, but I like it. I like the addition of Keyshawn Singleton. I think Jeremiah Coger is probably extremely underrated in all of this with what he did as a true freshman last year. That's the other thing with this, Brian. Like, a lot of these guys are young. They're young. Auburn tried to get other receivers in the portal, and they just didn't stick. And so the only portal additions you had in the receiver room were from USF, and then everybody else is just guys that chose to come back, like Bryce Kane, Sam Turner, Duke, and Eric Smith. And then your handful of high school signees, which I think Deshaun Spencer somehow gets on the field. I really, really like his tape. So can he play as a freshman? We'll see. But I don't know. I've got questions about the receiver room, but I think I would have had questions about the receiver room no matter what happened.
I'm curious in particular because I think he's a fit, and that's Turner. Like, they need vertical stretch guys, and that kid can run. If he can figure out the offense and gain some kind of balance, if you will, with understanding it and also having trust from a Byrum Brown, that could be your sixth receiver. Maybe he's even in the top five. I don't know, but you're going to have competition, and that's all you can really ask. But the big thing, again, you can't have 7 drops against anybody, let alone against Alabama.
Yeah, in a big game. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so, can these guys operate within a system? Can they operate with Byrum Brown? Yes, like we've seen that so far. And so I do think that'll be something that is will be well documented throughout the offseason for sure.
When we come back, I want to compare Auburn a little bit with the SEC and just kind of talk about the overall thoughts. There's one coach in particular that I really want to get Blackerby's take on. I didn't even prep him for this. I'm going to put him on the spot after the break. It's next right here on this crossover, Locked On Auburn and Locked On the Portal. Today's show is brought to you by Mazda, moving the game forward. For those who show there's more to the score, there is more on the screen. So let's think about it this way. We've been talking about Byrum Brown quite a bit, the USF transfer quarterback headed to Auburn. Look, that guy was put in a moment last year that was as big a spotlight as there could be if you live in the state of Florida. And for somebody like me that's lived in Tampa, I know what that really is like, because USF doesn't get a lot of coverage. They went to the Swamp, and they had a fourth quarter drive to win the game, and he led it. That is being in the moment and doing everything. These are the reasons why it takes somebody to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, the grit, and I never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there is more to you. All right, Mr. Blackerby, I'm just going to start with the fun question.
Okay.
You and I have talked about this a little bit off. I don't think we've talked about it much on air. If a certain Kalen DeBoer goes 9-3 next year, is he back at Alabama in 2027? Just going to put you right on the spot. Or at least what would the process be, in your opinion, for that? Because that's a complex circumstance, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I think it matters what it looks like. Who are those 3 losses to?
Sure.
I was looking at earlier this week. Like, I don't think Alabama's schedule is super difficult.
It's easier than Auburn's for sure.
Which would certainly fire up the folks in Tuscaloosa a little bit more. I mean, I think his seat would be hot for sure if they went 9-3 and missed the postseason, but I don't know if they'd fire him or not.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the questions that's talked about all offseason, because we have to have stuff to talk about, and Bama's a big name and all that.
Did you see the pictures of him doing media in Mobile for the Senior Bowl?
I did not. Should I?
Dude looks exhausted.
Oh, did he really?
He looks totally worn out. All the like people are making memes of it saying like it's like the Alabama job has aged him like the presidency. So
it's one of those jobs that can do that, because I'm sure like all these coaches are on the road doing recruiting right now, and they got to have booster fund. Like,
the demand is insane for any head coaching job, especially following Nick Saban. That's a big deal.
Oh, 100%. Now I want to ask you about somebody that is probably not dear to your heart, but I know you respect. Vanderbilt losing Diego Pavia.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a team crater more than Vandy in the SEC? I could see it because, look, there's discussion. I don't even want to say his name. They got a freshman quarterback coming in. It's not fair. That kid may end up starting. That's not a good deal in the Southeast.
Jared Curtis, right? That's his name.
I kind of feel bad for the kid because, look, if you start as a freshman, long term that maybe work out okay, but that first season, could this be a 5-7, like just show you how important Pavia was to one team kind of deal?
I mean, I think we know how important Pavia was. The interesting thing though is like culturally at Vanderbilt, they believe that they're back. Like they believe that they're a solid program now. And props to Clark Lee for doing that. They believe they're more than just Diego Pavia. And this won't be discussed, but I think Eli Stowers' impact was pretty large too. And they're losing him. He'll be drafted here in a few months. But yeah, I mean, there's no way, right? There's no way they keep it unless Jared Curtis is that dude, which some people said that he was. Still a freshman, but I don't know if they're going to crater, but there's no way they take a step forward. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of those teams that it's really, really important. Let me ask you about another quarterback. You're much higher on this young man than I am. Marcel Reed of Texas A&M. They lose Casey Concepcion. They're going to lose Le'Veon Moss. They're going to lose some of those really good offensive linemen. I mean, it's not like A&M's not bringing in players. Let's not kid ourselves. But do you think that he is leveled off, or he's going to take another step forward?
You're right. I've labeled myself as a Marcel Reed truther over the last few years, but man, that game against Miami did not help my case at all in the college football playoff. No. They entered themselves in the Cam Coleman sweepstakes. They obviously lost to Texas, but they wanted to get Reed more weapons, as they should. And I actually don't know who they brought in a receiver. I've not really looked into that. Did they end up revamping the receiving
core? A little bit, but the difference between what they got and getting Cam is kind of like the difference between my height and Shaq's.
Well, Concepcion, and then who's the other receiver that they had? He's gone too, right?
No, he's back. He's the kid from the state of Alabama. I forget his name, but Mario Craver.
Okay, Craver's back. I thought he was going to the draft. Okay.
I don't think
that helps. I mean, he can certainly be an impactful, wide receiver one in the SEC. Yeah, I mean, he's got to take a step forward. He's got to get more accurate with passes, down the field. That was certainly something that held him back. But I don't know. It just seemed like whenever there was an opportunity for him to make a play, he typically would, whether it was with his legs or with his arm. And then the playoff game happened, and I think a lot of people are going to be really down on him because of that, and rightfully so. They couldn't score any points. So we'll see what happens with Marcel Reed. I think the talent's there. I think the X factor traits are certainly there, but he benefited from having guys around him for sure.
Yeah, they had a lot of skill, and their O-line was very, very good. There was top 10 O-line conservatively, probably top 5. Sure. Final question for you. Third year in a row, the SEC was not in the national title game. What do you think the biggest reason for that is?
I mean, I still think it's the deepest conference, but it's not as strong at the top. And, ironically, when the SEC was seen as the elite conference in football, the depth may not have been there as much as it is now as it was then. Just because they had Alabama at the top. They had Georgia at the top. In 2019, they had LSU. I think it's deeper now than it was then. I just don't think there's that elite team currently. And I don't know if there's an elite team going into this season. I would guess Georgia, just because I think Gunnar Stockton coming back is boring and not flashy, but I think it's a big deal for Georgia. And And obviously we'll see what Texas does with, Arch taking that next step and bringing in Cam Coleman. I think it's going to be impactful for sure. So I think it'll be one of those two. Then obviously, Bama is Bama, as you said earlier. They've always got a chance to be that elite team. But yeah, I think the big reason is there's not that elite team anymore. There's a lot of solid teams. There's a lot of playoff caliber teams. But there's not that elite team like the Big Ten has had.
Do you equate much of that in terms of, there's like, let's use Missouri, for example. They stole Damon Wilson this past season from Georgia. And at one point this year, Wilson by himself had, per Pro Football Focus, more pass rush pressures than Georgia did. Like, it's just the depth that Kirby and Nick used to stack compared to everybody else. And to a certain degree, LSU as well at certain spots. Obviously, 19 was a really weird year. They hit lightning in a bottle. Nobody's going to say Ed Orgeron's one of the greatest coaches of all time, but that's a great team.
I mean, that happens, right? I mean, 2010 Auburn, I think, is on that list. Like, yeah, you got Cam Newton. Like that helps. That helps. And we'll see what happens with Indiana this past year. Was this lightning in a bottle, or is this going to be something that's sustained? I can't wait to see.
Yeah, that makes it a lot of fun. So do you think the rosters with the portal and NIL is the biggest factor for the league, quote unquote, flattening out a little bit?
I mean, maybe. I think it comes down to quarterback play and head coaching. I mean, you lose the greatest college football coach of all time, and then you haven't. I mean, who's been the best quarterback in the SEC over the last few years since they've been down?
I mean, it's hard to just pick one guy, but I would say Pavia. But I mean, no offense, but he's at Vanderbilt. How much impact does that have? Even with as unbelievable as it was, they still didn't make the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely build rosters around your quarterback for sure, but to catch lightning in a bottle, you need that elite quarterback, and that's what makes our first conversation we had today so important. Can Byrum Brown be that guy for Auburn? Can Sam Leavitt be that guy for LSU? We won't know until September and October and November roll around, but that's why this matters. That's why it's so important.
100%. Quarterback drives the bus. That does not change. And Auburn, I think, finally got somebody that I think is an elite player at quarterback. And again, he's in the same system. Yeah, I know he's going up another level, but I got him as my number 3 portal quarterback, and he's top 10, I think, overall.
Yeah,
going into this next season. Zach, any parting shots or any thoughts about Byrum Brown or anything Auburn related?
I mean, I think he's got a chance to have a really, really solid season at Auburn. They've certainly built the roster around him. Can't wait to see how he's used with this new Alex Golesh era at Auburn.
Tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Yes, Locked On Auburn, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And for folks tuning into the portal, however you find the portal, whatever platform, Locked On Auburn is there as well.
That's right. Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and of course on YouTube. This has been a crossover, Locked On Auburn and Locked On the Portal.